Hi, everybody. I am Krista of Practical Astros as part of the AsteriSofiaKairos collective. I'm here with Shauna of Smart Astro. Welcome, Shauna.
Thanks. Hi.
Sonia is taking a sabbatical for the month. She gave us the keys to the kingdom. So we are doing things a little bit differently and shaking it up. That's kind of what collectives get to do. We just get to play around. So we're here to talk about July. We're going to talk about the first week of July, which we'll talk about July 2nd. So we talked about July 1st last week, but we'll talk about July 2nd through July 9th. So yeah, I'll have an overview of the whole month, which the first and the last weeks are kind of the bookends of the fairly larger, busier weeks transits. I thought I was missing something when I was kind of building the slides of like, really, that's all we got. It just feels like we're constantly hit with so many transits simultaneously that we deserve some break.
We do.
So we're going to talk about week one, which is Venus and Uranus conjoining the final degrees of Taurus before Venus moves into Gemini the same day. And then Neptune goes retrograde in Aries the same day. And then Uranus goes into Gemini. So Venus and Uranus are going to meet in Taurus, and then within a few days, leave Taurus and go into Gemini for the first time this year. For Uranus, it's the first time since the 1940s, and since it's been into Gemini. So that will be quite a shift. So let's go into it. This is me. This is Shauna. And this is the week. So, okay. Firstly, I was looking at some images to kind of put in since we are going to focus on Venus and Uranus this week. And j'adore this haters going to hate movement of some Canva creator made this for Uranus. And I just think it is precious. But Uranus
Awesome.
going into Gemini, we're going to look at the chart next. But that's kind of the big one. But that's who that guy is over there. And then Venus over here on the left. The nice heart chakra color Venus sigil. But before they each go into Gemini, they are still in Taurus. Venus is at home in Taurus. It's one of her domiciles, it's her earthly domicile. And she will be finishing up her trip through Taurus after going through retrograde in Aries and Pisces earlier this spring. She's kind of enjoyed her time in Taurus. Honestly, I don't think that we're paying enough attention to it because we're so focused on Jupiter and Cancer. But both of them together happening simultaneously, I think is just a really lovely combination. Mm-hmm. But right before she leaves her domicile, she is going to meet up with Uranus, which is kind of the great disruptor. And the concept of disrupting in a fixed sign can bring a little anxiety. Doesn't have to bring anxiety. It can just like shake things up to see. It's almost like buying something and like kind of shaking it to see if it's sturdy enough, if it's worthy enough to like take home. Uranus kind of shakes things up, and Patrick Watson mentioned once, and it just kind of really stuck because it rang true, is Uranus transits can feel malefic in the moment, but benefic in the long run. And I kind of feel like that's what this is. It's not just unnecessarily chaotic disruption that Uranus brings. It really does challenge us and test how strong are the structures? And there's a bit of pride with Taurus of like, building something that has sustainable power that will survive an earthquake, that will survive a natural disaster, that will survive any sort of challenges to it. And there's a sweetness of Venus and Taurus with Uranus and Taurus to see like, things might have been shooken up. They might be shaken up again, but it adds some spiciness to the Taurus house. And I like that they are meeting at this final kind of fated kismet degree before they each go into Gemini. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, it's really a nice it's a nice reminder that Venus isn't always just sweet, right? That Venus and Taurus is not just here to admire the beauty, and that it's a good reminder that there's work in that also.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earthquakes, and while you're talking about these things, I'm like, you can't see the results while you're in the middle of that shake. You can't see that, right? You don't know where all the pieces are going to land. And it's a really great opportunity. If you think about Taurus is that earthy, solid, feeling of everything. Venus wanting that beauty, and then Uranus just coming in and bulldozing, in
Hmm.
with its potential. But what can you rise up after,
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, total sidetrack. I can't help but think this image of Venus, she's looking at her nails.
Oh yeah, totally. Like,
She's totally just like, ah.
I
But
knew I was right. I knew I was right.
yeah, it's completely right.
Hmm.
Anywhere from, getting the manicure done to, putting your nails back in the dirt again, even with the fresh manicure.
I think with just these two characters, like maybe just the way that I put them on the page, but I was imagining like if you're at a party and you have this Uranian character that just like
Hmm.
busts in and like causes all this, like they're new, no one really knows how they got there, if they were invited, if they belong, who is this character, but they're making noise and they're like kind of like maybe tipping over your plate of charcuterie, or they're changing the channel on the TV, or like putting their own playlist onto the speakers. It's like they're making all this change, and then the other characters in the at the party are like, "Who the hell do you think you are?" And maybe from that disruption of a party, you find yourself allying with people that you wouldn't have talked to, or you had some other issue. It's like something can come in and disrupt it, and then it makes you reevaluate your connections with other people. Of like, I know you and I got into a tiff last summer, but like, screw that guy. I'm going to stick with you at this party. You know what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
a made up example. Like maybe that actually is going to happen to you. I don't know. But just like the disruption of a flow of like a good time, when that happens, it kind of helps you reevaluate other things. And it really does. You do shake, think of the Taurus house. Where is that your first house? Is that your second house? Like, for your skills and resources and money? Or is it your third house of like neighborhood and sisterhood and siblinghood and all that? If something comes in and is like disrupting at one final time, what can you glean? What sort of gold can you glean from that experience, because it was shooken up, but you wouldn't maybe have realized it if it had been placid and easy. That last disruption like really does give you like a little bit of sweet, um, almost like panning for gold. You have to kind of agitate in the water to like see what sort of glimmering beauty can rise to the surface, and you only get that because of that agitation. So just thinking about it, wherever Taurus is in your house, that there is this disruption, but I just really like that final moment, because then later that day, Venus is going to be like, checking her nails, see ya, bye Felicia, and goes into Gemini. Which
Right.
I wanted you to talk about Venus and Gemini. And what are some of your keywords? What are some of your insights of Venus and Gemini?
So as I was writing my notes, I was thinking about this. First, it's like the Venus leaving Taurus while Uranus is still there. It's like um, Venus is ready to leave. She's leaving that party you mentioned, and she
Mm-hmm.
pulls the fire alarm as she goes,
Yeah.
She's just like, deuces, I'm out. Um, but yes, Venus and Gemini, that's me. I have it, 12th house. So, ew, I'm bashful, whatever. I'm an asshole. Smart Astro, hello. It's the first word that came to mind is sapiosexual because it's like you develop the mental relationship for me.
Mm,
Like it's the social connection. Um it's the oh gosh. It's all that internal like
mm,
mental work in my mind.
mm-hmm,
Um, but it's, I don't know. I feel like Venus and Gemini is like lighter and chatty and flirty and a little less soulmate and more like situationship.
mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
it gets a little spicy, but it can be very brainy at the same time. Think, like, oh, God, who's the poet? Pablo. Um,
Neruda.
Yeah. It's very squish and mush and but so full of descriptive words like
Mhm.
squish and mush, maybe.
Squish and mush are very
I mean,
Venusian words.
they're such words. But it's a really, really good time to explore something new, variety,
Hmm.
curiosity, maybe changing aesthetics in a way, you know.
Hmm.
You might be ready to say I'm done playing safe and just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Venus is ruled, or Gemini is ruled by Mercury. And so there's like this, one of the things that comes to mind with Mercury is just like tennis match, is like this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Hmm.
And, the Mercury signs, Gemini and Virgo, are both double bodied. And there is this communication, this like, Mercury as a psychopomp traveling between worlds. He's not the only psychopomp. Venus is a psychopomp too. This traveling between worlds, this back and forth, this engagement, this, it's like have you ever made that like glue stuff for your kids, like
Yeah.
cornstarch and water? And
Hmm.
separately, they are cornstarch and water. But if you put them together and then you have friction, then it creates this secret third thing. And it can
Hmm.
only do it if there's the reaction from the other. And to me, that feels like what Mercury offers us is the ability to, if we so choose, to interact. And it's that back and forth. It's like if we think of Venus as just in themes of like love and relationships, if the relationship is the tennis ball or the ping pong ball, it's the players on either side. The game only goes or continues on if both players are involved with like batting it back and forth. And there's like a fun and playfulness to it. It's airy, it is lighter. It's not so saccharine like it is in
Hmm.
Cancer, or heavy and
Right.
faded as it is in Taurus. The in between time, it's like, yeah, let's just have fun. It's like the fleetingness of it. But if you have Venus and Gemini natally, doesn't mean that you only experience love that way. I also think of just like
Right.
the concept of what is your love language. And for Venus and Taurus, it's like food, straight up is love language. Venus and Cancer,
Yeah.
food. I have
Yeah.
Venus and Cancer, and I got a reading by an astrologer, and I was talking to her and said something about like I really love folk music from all over the world. I love traditional folk music. Like I don't, even if I have no blood in the game of that culture, I just fall in love with it. And she was like, that is Cancer Venus coded if I ever heard it. It's like just that home and tradition and
Hmm.
beauty and memory and heartbreak and all those things that you find in traditional folk music. But in
Hmm.
Venus and Gemini, it is like you said, it's that communication, it's that intellectual
Hmm.
stimulation, and it has to stay fresh and it has to go deep. Gemini is
Hmm.
incredibly deep. It's not just
Hmm.
surface. It is like
Hmm.
it is the investigator of the mystery, and you have that if you have that participation with language,
Hmm.
with Venus and Gemini.
Yeah,
I
I'm the
think.
worst person at the small talk. We can talk about the weather for 30 seconds. I'm done. I don't
Yeah,
care. We both know that it's 93 degrees outside today and it's
yeah,
disgusting, you know?
yeah.
Like tell me what moved you to this place in your life. Tell me,
Hmm.
give me the dark and dirty and yes,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the transition of Venus conjoining Uranus at that last degree and then like jumping over into Gemini, it's almost like she can see what's just on the horizon of like, I'm going to have
Hmm.
so much fun. She's not going to stay there
Hmm.
that long. She's going to go into Cancer later on in the month. So it's a
Hmm.
very quick transit. And so I think the inception chart of any sort of, ingress of a planet into a new sign is always fun. And I think it'll be incredibly dynamic having it happen on the same day that she joins Uranus and then jumps into Gemini. It really does
Hmm.
seems to be like that whole week. We're going to look at the chart of Uranus into Gemini, which happens a few days later. So we'll get to see a little bit of this.
Hmm.
But before that, also the same day later that day, Neptune, which is in Aries, uh, is going to turn retrograde and go back into Pisces. What was it? December 10th is when it turns direct,
Yeah.
and then goes back into Aries in April. And it won't be back in Pisces again. So this is our last undulation of a chapter of Neptune and Pisces. It's going to take a while because Neptune just goes very slow. Um, but what are your initial thoughts of Neptune returning?
I think it'll be nice. things in the mundane world feel very, very heavy and chaotic right now. And I think it could be very sweet to have just a little um, cool down,
Mm,
going back into Pisces for
yeah.
just a bit, just to remind us maybe what the sweetness is, and remind us that it's not always disillusion, but illusions are necessary to keep us moving forward.
Hmm.
It causes inspiration, and it causes innovation, and it's if you don't know what the good things are, and if you don't keep sight of those good things, you end up falling into bad habits and bad patterns. And
Mm,
we can see that happening on a mundane level. And, you mentioned something in your solstice talk recently about um, uh, so much division being
hmm.
displayed and exploited. And if we don't remember to continue uniting, regardless of our perspectives and things, that will end up just dissolving. And I
Yeah.
think Neptune is a really, really good reminder of, disillusion versus illusion versus inspiration. And I think having Neptune in Pisces for just a little bit longer could
Hmm.
could keep us holding on to something really cool.
Yeah. And also, like right now, Neptune and Saturn are those early degrees of Aries, and they're squaring this really lovely Jupiter in Cancer. And I like, they're not going to have like a real direct hit by degree, but Neptune going back into a water sign will then trine that Jupiter by whole sign instead of squaring it. And I think that in itself is going to just kind of change the the way that that a really beloved Jupiter in Cancer can express itself. I also think that the way that Jupiter in Cancer expressing itself is going to be how we show up for each other because there's difficulty. I think that it's not like this. Um, it's not like this idea that everything is working and then you just get like the cherry on top of Jupiter and Cancer. It's like, no, everything is very dysfunctional. And so we have Jupiter and Cancer then to like be in our toolkit to like be able to support each other and have flow in the most nourishing ways. But nourishing is not a word that we think of with Uranus
Mm-mm.
or Gemini. Nourishing may be in the mental space. So
Mm.
let's look at that chart here, and we're gonna do for the month of July at least. We're gonna do some rising sign horoscopes, but just for the modality or the mode that is really getting hit the loudest. In Hellenistic astrology and horoscopic astrology, where you kind of give preference to the sign that is on the rise, the sign that is rising. We look at this Uranus into Gemini as being one, it hasn't happened in 80 plus years. That's pretty notable. And because Venus is also there too, we have Mars in Virgo. And for this moment, we have the moon in Sagittarius, we have the nodes in mutables. So for this week, especially the mutables with that ingress of Uranus into Gemini, it hits all the angles. So the mutable signs are Gemini, which is for this chart. For my location, it is happening really close to the ascendant. So this is Gemini rising that puts Pisces in the 10th house, Sagittarius in the 7th, Virgo in the 4th. But you can kind of shift them. If you have Virgo rising, this puts Gemini at the 10th house, Pisces the 7th, Sagittarius the 4th. For Sagittarius, if you're a Sagittarius rising, this is Virgo the 10th house, Gemini the 7th, and Pisces as the 4th. And then if you're Pisces rising, this is Sagittarius in the 10th, Virgo in the 7th, and Gemini in the 4th. Did I say all those right? In my head, it made
I
sense.
think you did. Yeah, I'm impressed. I'm
um,
impressed you got that.
so yeah, so let's talk first about Uranus into Gemini. There's lots of mundane things that we can bring up. Yes, it was, for, both Sean and I are in the US. And so it's a part of our own history. If we use the US Sibley chart with Sagittarius rising, we have Gemini as our 7th house of relationships and negotiations and death and merging with the other, all those 7th house topics. But we experienced Uranus in the 7th during the Second World War, just collectively, but then also in the Civil War. Correct? Now that I'm saying it
That sounds right. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so so with that, like there are like for US politics specifically, there's a history of the disruption of our relationships with others really challenging us just as a nation. And Diana Rose Harper talked a lot about the shadow side of Jupiter in Cancer is this hyper nationalism. And the combination of that together makes me concerned because I think that with division, with any sort of double-bodied mutable sign, there is this like chance to be even more divided because you can be divided of your own mind. But then having Uranus come in there and really disrupt it, to then have that kind of potential for hyper-nationalism, or, maybe it's the nationalism of your country of origin or your own heritage. Like I'm a white mutt. I come from England, Scotland, Wales, France, Ireland. It's just like, to even have like lineage obsession of one of those, or being hyper American, or whatever it is. It's like the idea of getting lost and like being identified with that while also being kind of split with that Uranus and Gemini, I think can be kind of a volatile cocktail between those two. Luckily, they can't really see each other because they're next to each other, they're reverse. But those are the first two things that come in mind on a larger mundane. On a personal level, I think having it in there, having had Uranus go through Taurus, where I have lots and lots and lots of Taurus, it is incredibly liberating, and it was never easy, and it was always worth it. So I would say good luck to Gemini placements, because I feel like you might be able to adapt to those changes a lot more gracefully than maybe a fixed earth sign would. But I'm here to tell you, like on this side of it, I think that it maybe was malefic in the beginning, but completely benefic long term. Like so grateful, so thankful for that disruption. And just knowing that everything is temporary, and that every time something is disrupted, you have the choice to choose, and to always choose kind of with your heart, and not your head, which might be difficult for Gemini to like really pull into like what the intuitive knowing is, would be my main advice for this Gemini Uranus transit. Thoughts?
Yeah, my pause is I was thinking about the cardinal versus the fixed versus the mutable, and I think we're going to cover those things anyway. But with mutable, do you agree that it feels like there's a slowing down in a sense?
Hmm.
Um, Thoughts? Lots
Thoughts?
of them. Um,
I have a
nothing but.
question for the Mercury and Gemini person. Like thoughts?
Yeah. She freezes. Funny joke, Hermes. Um, so, um, I was thinking about the considerations between the mutable, the fixed, and the cardinal, and how cardinals are that gateway, the pivot, right? So that's where my thinking was coming with mutables feeling like there's the slowdown first. Um, I don't feel like I've worked this out fully in my mind yet, but
Yeah,
it
that's
feels
great.
like because they're getting ready to make a pivot, or they're getting ready to make a choice on what direction to go.
Mm.
And, that it feels like that's going to keep unfolding for me a little bit. But yeah, I think with the mutables, whether it's rising or, 10-7 or 4, it's going to feel like a bit of a shakeup. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I agree with you. I think mutables are going to have an easier time. Yeah, I'm imagining someone like on a trampoline or um, like a balance ball. Yeah, like a
Mm-hmm.
balance ball is better. You get shook, but you can spring back a little bit because you have the flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there might be exhaustion and like uh
sure.
having like if you're used to having to adjust, like your adjusting muscles are well honed, but and so maybe you don't really want that, or maybe you're looking at it and like my life is already it already feels disruptive, or it always is disruptive, or, you look at the idea of Uranus cracking things open and disrupting it. But in an air sign, in Mercury sign, like I hope that it will be just the cracking open of illumination and knowledge and curiosity and that sort of breakthrough, that sort of like cracking open. If you can, it's almost like when you jog or run and you have that impact on your bones, like if you looked at it under a microscope, you have these micro fractures. Like every time you land, you kind of create these little tiny, tiny, tiny micro fractures. And then your body fills those microfractures up with calcium. And that's what makes your bones stronger. That's why you get stronger. I mean, it screws your joints up, but your bones get really strong running because it's like, it's this body's natural response to fill the bone fractures up with more calcium. It makes stronger bones. And I think about that with like when you kind of break your mind open with like entheogen herbs or just meditation or traveling, anything that kind of like breaks you out of your normal body, spiritual body or physical body or psychic body, whatever it is. If you fill that up with the good things instead of doom scrolling or conspiracy theory that is just someone's motivation to sell some sort of product so that they can get more money, like be very like, I would invite you that things may be kind of fractured open in the mental space, but to fill that up with things that are nourishing or fortifying for your spirit. So like even just being away from information, because we're constantly surrounded. I mean, like nobody is, for the most part, lacking in access to information. It's being lost in so much information that we don't really understand anything that's going on. And so a way to me, it's like to fulfill that is to fill in all those cracks and gaps with like really good, reading really good authors, reading actual books and not just, 140 characters on a social media post or just watching a TikTok that lasts 15 seconds. It's like going outside and like reading an actual book, or a book on Kindle of an author that you really like, or just having something that is outside of what you normally do to fill in the cracks with something that then maybe will fortify it. I mean, doing meditation, like guided meditation or just, silent meditation, it cracks you open. And if you fill that up immediately with, something that is just sugar for the soul, then you're going to kind of corrupt your own self by that's like that balance of being cracked open too much. And then what you're filling those cracks with is not fundamentally very good for you. I think that is the fear that I would like to warn people against. I think we all have the capacity to participate in this way that is like we could be like super brilliant in the next couple of years for having, Uranus and Gemini, if we choose to engage in things that are fundamentally better for us individually and collectively. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I was just thinking back to 2020, and there was so much news coming
Mm,
through all the time that had no answers, didn't make sense, and it was everyone's opinion over anything
mhm.
else that you couldn't figure out your own opinion. And that
Yeah.
was that was when I made the choice to shut off all of my alerts.
Mm,
It's very few alerts that I actually allow to come through on my phone, because I'm a Cancer rising, which means Gemini is my 12th house.
yeah.
If my 12th house gets inundated, if my private spaces, my inner thoughts and my inner world are getting inundated with everyone else's opinions, I
Hmm.
can't sort out what my own is.
Yeah.
And so I made that decision then when it was just so intense for everyone. And
Hmm.
I haven't turned it back on. There's very few things, but that also allows me the opportunity and me the discretion and the choice to seek those things out when I want and when I'm ready. So
Yeah.
you can use more intention around those things. And I think that's what you were getting at, filling in the cracks with intention.
Hmm. Yeah. My during the pandemic, my mom gave me really good advice. She and I think very differently on many subjects, but we still communicate really well together. And she gave me advice that she uses herself, and I just think it's good. And I was just reminded of it. She said, Krista, make sure that you subscribe to something that is written, that is only sent out, ideally in paper, once a month or once every few weeks. Because the idea that something will be read and kind of sat on for a lot longer of a time, as opposed to an article that you can read in a day and then read another article the next day. And it's just like, there's something about the elongation of time. She is very Saturn coded in her own natal chart. So it was a very Saturnine advice that I think is helpful. It's like, if you read something in the context that the author intended it to be read, and the follow-up of that article isn't supposed to be read until like a month later, you sit with that information differently. And it's a way, like we did a book club. I hadn't done a book club in years, but like having a chapter to read and have the whole week to read it, it really changed my relationship with the information I was reading. And I think you can do that. It doesn't have to be like paper tangible things, because I think that what we'll see with Uranus and Gemini is that we are going to get away from that. I'm take my paper books out of my cold dead hands sort of a person, but I think that we are going to like have more access to that sort of information. And so when I say fill the cracks, I know Sonia has like her phrases, like to, or her weekly words, like maybe that's what, to me, it's like filling in the space, like with water. Water doesn't have a shape of its own. It fills whatever container it's in. And so I feel like we have a limited capacity for our own air, or the wind around us too. It's like, what kind of wind container, air container are you going to fill? Because I feel like Uranus and Gemini is going to like disrupt that container. So how do we like change our minds and change the way we think, or decide that we are not going to change our mind? I think there's power in that too, of really kind of being like, no, I really do believe this now. But being very careful and protective and deliberate, and yeah, like you said, intentional with what information we allow to stay, and I think that it's stopping it at the door, not letting so much information in the door.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to be discerning in real time when you have so much of it just being fire hosed at you.
Yeah. Definitely. If you're drawing, just to expand a little bit on that, and it's drawing Neptune in for me at this point, because it's so natural breathing in and breathing out. And your body and your instinct controls that. And instinctually, when the smog is bad, or there's fires nearby and the air quality is terrible, you instinctively know what to do. You're not breathing the same way when you step outside as you are inside your own home. And I think that's a really great kind of mirror for being choosy about what kind of information you're ingesting. It doesn't feel so instinctual when it comes to information and your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And mirrors is something that comes up with Gemini. I have a Gemini bestie, and she brings up mirrors a lot, mostly in like, because there is like seemingly collective hate against Gemini. There's like, people are like, oh, crazy Gemini. And her defense is kind of like, Gemini just put up the mirror. So if you think Geminis are crazy, then you were the crazy one. And
That's amazing.
I think it's kind of a little bit of both, because to be fair, Geminis can be a little insane because they have so much information that they are connected to. And yet they are also that mirror. I mean, just the sigil for Gemini looks like a portal, looks like a doorway. And like in Harry Potter, there was that mirror that's like this mirror. You saw your future, but it was really like what you just wanted to see. It wasn't necessarily the truth, the fundamental truth of what the future was. It was like what you wanted to see in the future. And that was just a reflection of your own, psyche that was coming out. And I think that there is that mirroring that Gemini has within themselves, and then to all of us too.
Projection. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want to run through just some keywords for the mutable risings? We've talked a lot about Gemini. So this is the first house of self and identity, and the way that you just even express yourself. How do you think that Uranus transit in the first house is going to display itself through Gemini risings?
For gems, I think because Uranus just moved out of the 12s, I think it's going to feel more like a breath of fresh air.
Mm, yeah.
Maybe what you've just gone through and experienced, whether it's small or large, will still affect you in a um, in the things that make you feel grounded, perhaps. But I think it's going to um, allow that space to open up so you can start to see different possibilities now. Uranus in the first is going to shake up your self-identity in a sense, or potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having just traveled through that 12th, that could just be so releasing as well,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Uranus is it will go back to Taurus and then move back in next year to Gemini, and it'll be there for like 7, 8 years. So at this onset on July 7th, having Uranus go in, it's not like overnight all Gemini risings are gonna,
Right.
like fly off in a hot air balloon. Over a period of time, it will incrementally get closer and closer to your ascendant. And then if you have any other planets in Gemini, if it's aspecting your own natal Mercury, I mean, there's other things, outer moving planets, unless it's within a degree. I don't see that the volume of that transit is loud enough to really even notice. But the inception usually brings some sort of omen, like the inception of any sort of transit into a new sign, there's something ominous, not necessarily negative, but ominous, meaning full of omens for that day. So looking at July 7th just as the day of paying attention to any sort of lightning bolt ideals or any sort of like out of the blue thing, I think that Geminis might feel it more on that day. But then also depending on where your actual ascendant degree is, you may not feel it for years. I have Taurus placements, but a lot of them are in the later degrees, and it took until Uranus got close to those that I really kind of understand what was happening. So again, it's not going to be just like overnight, all of your Gemini rising friends are just going to go insane all at once,
Probably not. No.
Probably not. So let's flip
Thanks
it.
for
So what about Sagittarius?
Um, well, I mean, for that Gemini rising, you could be seeing, or for the Sag, sorry, you could be seeing that in a spouse, in a partner, someone at work, in your day-to-day reactions with people or interactions with people. Um, Sag for me feels just it's so strange because I don't feel so connected to Sagittarius, but it's my sixth house. Like I live it, so I don't know how I don't connect with it, but it could just be so mundane for me that I don't notice it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but I feel like you're gonna notice those things more in your experience with the other person, with the other.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times things happening in the seventh really do speak to people in your life,
Mhm.
or how you perceive, those people in your life. So maybe there is a new realization that you have, kind of like an aha moment about a relationship. Maybe it's not that it's happening to them, but it's just your own understanding of it. And
Yeah.
because for Sag risings, Uranus is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, which is in your ninth house. And so maybe it is the understanding or the belief about that relationship really does get illuminated or turned on a little bit more. But again, like depending on where the descendant line is, it may take a while. It might hit it immediately if you're an early degree Sag rising. But it tends to speak to actual relationships. And again, looking at your own natal chart, it's best to work with an astrologer to be able to pull in all the threads. I saw a thing on Instagram where the guy was talking about Theseus and the thread and the labyrinth to kill the Minotaur. And the thread that he was given was called a clue. And it was because he held on to that thread as he found his way through the labyrinth and then was able to find his way back out. And the word clue then kind of like eventually through time was like an ability to solve a mystery or a puzzle, but really it's just like our connection to knowing of how to return and how to get to someplace. And I just like the threads is what astrologers weave a nativity to the transits that really, it's like threading that thread around the chart to be able to put context instead of just an isolating transit. So you can ask an astrologer to kind of help walk you through that to get a little bit more understanding. And seventh house can be a little tricky because it's like, is it you? Is it someone else? I mean, there's plenty of other tricky houses, but seventh house does kind of bring up the possibility that it could be happening to someone that you are just connected to and not necessarily your own immediate life outside of the relationship.
Right.
All right, so let's spin the wheel. Let's do Pisces rising. So this will be fourth house for Pisces rising that this transit's coming. It's leaving your third and going angular, getting loud. The volume turns up, especially if you have an early degree Pisces rising. It's going to square that ascendant by whole sign, square it pretty quickly if you have an early degree rising. The fourth house is that anchor, that connection, that home, that nest. And I mean, just disruption in that. I mean, I just wonder, like a mundane thing. It's like, I wonder if you just will keep losing internet over and over and over and over again, while Uranus is in your fourth, of like, you have to invest in like one of those mesh networks because like you just keep getting disruptions, or your light bulbs keep like exploding, or some sort of like tangible physical thing that's happening in your house, just as that comical Uranus and Gemini transit. But also just could be like disruption of like bringing fresh air of like, what does home mean to you? How do you connect with your lineage? Where do you want to live? I mean, is this a disruption enough to like trigger you to like think about like where you actually want to be? Do you want to just sell your house and move somewhere else? I mean, it can be that kind of grand. But yeah, I think on a tangible way, it's like this disruption, this electrified, illuminating disruption, just of how you connect, whether it's physically or through your own lineage and bloodline and heritage and familial lines, or just like what brings you comfort to feel safe within whatever situation that you're at with family or with physical needs.
I just keep thinking of, maybe someone in your household decides to paint their walls a random color, and it's not the typical, baby blue or light pink or soft yellow. It's like, I don't know, burnt
Tiger
orange or
orange.
something. Yeah. And they throw, black curtains on it or whatever. But yeah.
Especially with Venus there too. I mean, the fact that Venus is there with Uranus at the inception, I think it's funny. And I think it might be Venus coded, like when that actually happens. So yeah, painting your basement or painting something in your house.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
The words avant-garde keep coming up for me too. Just like something, ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's flip it then. So if we have Virgo on the ascendant, that puts Uranus and Venus up there in the top of the chart in the 10th house, kind of how you're seen, your fame or infamy, depending on your behavior. So what do you think about Uranus up there in the 10th for Virgo risings?
Goodness gracious.
That's not going to scare them.
No, it's not going to scare anybody. What if it's something as simple as you do a crazy haircut that no one expected of you, or you're a business professional and you decide to go in one day with blue hair. Evidently, I'm pulling out the colors right now because of Venus. Thanks. But what also if you, I don't like bringing up the negative stuff. If you end up losing a job or your boss decides to retire and you get promoted suddenly, like that could definitely be a thing that happens in that 10th house for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see this as kind of having that connection with change at work. Because you also have Mars in the first at this inception. Mars in the first, it's empowering to have Mars in the first. It can be physically injury causing to have Mars in the first. It can make you tired. It can make you stand up for yourself. But Mercury, your ascendant ruler, is in the 12th. And so having that, I think, can create some anxieties maybe related to work. And I think it'll be trickier for Virgo risings because the South Node is in your first house. You have Mars in the first house. Now, the Vedic idea of South Node is good with the bad one, like kind of reducing some of the negatives that are related to a malefic in the first. A positive spin on it is, okay, maybe there's some anxiety that you're dealing with Mercury in the 12th and Mars in the first, together. But maybe that disruption is actually helping you get out of these systems that you've created for yourself to find a more efficient way to be both in your own self, in your body, in your own mind, in that 12th, and also at work, or just how you're seen with others. Like if, Virgos have this calculating, put together, no frills sort of aesthetic often, not always, but often. And to have Uranus go up there and really shake it up, it's that, it's like, how do I describe it? It's not a bad thing to be shaken up and discover new ways of systems, because Virgo is always going to find comfort in systems. It's this Mercury ruled. And there's going to be a Mercury retrograde in the 12th house. Also, I think kind of combined with that, of this reevaluation of how much mental space can be spent in old systems that are not sustainable for you anymore. And I feel like it's just going to be expressed through that work career house. And, not everybody has a career or works, but it's just like the house that people know you as. And if you're Virgo rising, your Mercury ruled, Mercury also rules your 10th house of how you're seen. So they're kind of inextricable with each other. And so I just think that it might just be expressed through the 10th, but it's something that you're also dealing with internally with that Mercury, and then the soon to be Mercury retrograde and some Cazimis in your 12th. And maybe you won't, for Virgos, it's like until Mercury goes retrograde and comes back through and then has the Cazimi in Virgo in September, I feel like the Uranus and Gemini transit is really entangled with some personal deep work that Virgos are going to be dealing with, that maybe there's not going to be the illumination of until later on during that September Mercury Cazimi. I know that was a little tangential, but it doesn't feel as straightforward for Virgo risings to me.
No, it doesn't. But you're so right. With the Virgos, they always have that very buttoned up, monochromatic kind of appearance, or at least that's how we think of them. But it's going to shake up the 10th. Like that means they're a Leo 12th house.
Yeah.
That means they maybe secretly like the spotlight. So what if they have like a secret podcast or whatever, and that gets discovered,
Yeah.
something fun. In my mind, I'm not on OnlyFans, but in my mind, I just went like,
Yeah.
what if that Virgo rising
Yeah.
has an OnlyFans and it gets, discovered?
Yeah, or you decide to like start up something like an OnlyFans, where something is like it's a channel of that sort of busy work and illumination and pleasure, and a way to kind of channel some of that like mental activity into a place that is hidden and secret, and that Venus and Uranus there kind of frees you to do that. But yeah, it's like when you said the monochrome outfit, it's almost like there is like a uniform that it's like a functional uniform that Virgo risings can have. And so maybe it's just that, maybe it's just like you decide to kind of change up what your uniform looks like, like change up that there's a different color scheme, or like you're going to find like this, just like a new shirt that you can get in multiple colors that you wear, as opposed to just like always wearing black or always wearing khaki or whatever it is. It's like the Uranus Venus there really does free you up to just play around with how you express yourself. And maybe the Uranus in the 10th will like free you from the idea that you don't have to be seen in any particular way, that with, like you said, Leo in the 12th, you might have these ideas of your own way that you feel you are, but that's not necessarily always expressed. And the Uranus in there is kind of like you can express, however you want to, and you were given the permission or the invitation to, at least, and nobody's going to think it's as big of a deal as you do,
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's a big week just for this. We talked about Venus and Uranus and Taurus, and then both of them going into Gemini, the Neptune retrograde. And then we're going to meet again for next week, where we're going to focus on the full moon in Capricorn, and Saturn's going retrograde a few days later. So thanks so much for everybody joining us for this week, and we'll see you next time.